I'm not going to devalue that size. I can stay with you, but I'm going to get as close as I can to increase my value. You know, it's kind of like being a small house in the neighborhood. Good. Yourself? All right. I slept small surgery. Got that hospital.
I'm trying to make sure well, that's what all the county. Just gotta get them. I've already sent them, I just sent them up to the tree.
Greedy.
I've got to do one more.
Are you gelling with your Magellan? Gelling with me?
Well, I told them that.
I wore a raspberry beret. Oh wait, that was her. She wore a raspberry beret.
Kind of fight for a second.
Yeah, that one.
No, I said, there's not a, you know, I mean, they're later this year than they were last year.
On Tuesday, October 17th, our prayer and pledge, or our pledge and national anthem will be performed by County Clerk David Hooten. Thank you, Mr. Hooten. Is there a motion to approve the minutes of Thursday, September 21st?
Make a motion to approve.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
5 through 32 are the consent docket items. Is there a motion?
Motion to accept.
Approve.
Approve.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
33, Danny.
Good morning. All right, let's go ahead and look at page 3 of the monthly financial report. Be looking at the PowerPoint that's attached to the agenda. All right, this Let's look at our general fund through the month of September. We ended the month with a cash balance of $3.8 million. Revenue to date, we've collected a little less than $4 million. That's about 4.7% of what we budget. And last year at this time, we had collected 5.5%. So nothing out of the ordinary this time of year. Cash balance is getting a little low. So far through September, we've transferred $8.5 million in temporary transfers out of other funds just to help with the cash flow until we start receiving property taxes in December. Still looking at general fund on page 5. Revenue to date compared to last year is down $518,000. Nothing too concerning there. That's just a timing issue on some of the items that we typically collect this time of year. So you'll see that number go up, back up next month. Expenditures out of this year's budget compared to expenditures from last year's budget, up about $386,000. That's about a 2.5% increase. That's to be expected. We budgeted an increase this year compared to last, so nothing really alarming there either. Flip on over to page 11. Take a look at employee benefits. We ended the month with a cash balance of $1.7 million in employee benefits fund. Last year we had $1.3 million in cash balance. Medical and prescription claims through September, when you compare to last year through September, claims are down about $847,000. That's about a 14.4% decrease over the same time last year. So when you plug in the numbers, that estimated annual, the second column toward the right there, we estimate, just taking the first 3 months averages, that will come up short about $651,000. As each month goes by, that average changes. If you'll recall, last month that was a negative $1.9 million, so we're heading in the right direction. We do know October's claims numbers, medical and prescription claims, those are down as well, even more so. So when you plug in October's numbers, the decrease in our claims goes up to about 15.5%. So we're heading in the right direction. Overall, we're still looking at about $1 million less in claims compared to the same number of weeks and months last year. So we are trending down. Just to remind this board, as I do every month, we budgeted about $2 million less in transfers this year than we did last year, in hopes that we'll see $2 million less in claims. So far, we're at $1 million. So if it stays at $1 million, obviously we'd have to transfer a little bit more money going forward. As we're talking about employee benefits, here's the number for October. When you plug in October numbers, the decrease goes up to 15.7%. So trending in the right direction. As we're talking about employee benefits, and later on in this agenda, you're going to be voting on whether to increase the premiums or not. Just a couple of notes here. This is a look at the transfers in to employee benefits over a 10-year period. You can see back at 10 years ago, we transferred $1.3 million into employee benefits fund from general fund. Last year, we transferred $10.5 million. So that gap is really getting wider. Part of the reason is, I'm going to touch on in these next couple slides, the percentage that we charge employees for premiums is based on a 75-25% split. The board decided years ago, hey, we'll charge the employees 25% of the total cost. You can see 10 years ago, when you plug in the numbers, the actual numbers of expenses compared to what the employees paid. 10 years ago, the employees paid about 27.5% of the total. And we try to stay at that 25% line there. As you can see, that percentage has gone down considerably. And then last year, the employees' premiums covered about 18% of the total cost in the plan. This is a look at the employee premiums over that same 10-year period. The employee premiums have stayed the same the last 2 calendar years, and the 2 years prior to that, they remained frozen as well. But what I really want to touch on is the employer rates. What we charge the departments each month for those employees that pay premiums. The employer share, the premiums that we charge each department in general fund and special revenue funds have remained the same the last 4 fiscal years. Last time we've changed those rates was 13-14. And just some numbers there. The first column there is the actual numbers that we charge each department in fiscal year 16-17 for the employer share of the premiums. You can see this is general fund. We pulled about $7.4 million in charges out of general fund departments. And then the next page we're looking at is special revenue funds. Same column, that fiscal year 16-17. Special revenue funds were charged about $3.4 million. So yeah, general fund, special revenue funds, what we charge departments, we deposited about $10.8 million from what we charged each department into the employee benefits fund. If we had changed the rates to what the actuary has recommended this fiscal year, that middle column highlighted in yellow, and charge each department accordingly to follow true cost accounting, so we're allocating those costs to each department instead of just transferring money out of general fund. The point I want to make here is if we had changed the rates for this fiscal year, which we did not, we're still charging the departments in that first column, each department's being charged, but if we were charging the rates that the actuary says we should be charging departments, special revenue funds would have contributed almost $600,000 more to the employee benefits fund. So in essence, general fund, by transferring money instead of charging departments, in essence, general fund is supplementing special revenue funds to the tune of about $600,000. And that's in 16-17. That's been happening for the last 4 years. So that's why you see, that's the main reason you see this number growing. I mean, we're really not cost allocating the way we should to all the departments. General fund's taking on more and more of the brunt of the employee benefits funding. Another item I wanted to point out on this, back to this slide, that middle column, toward the bottom there, I'm not going to pick on one department, but this one kind of jumped out. The public defender is a state-funded office. They participate in our health plan, and then we charge each department, we charge their employees, and then the state reimburses for what the department is charged. If we'd applied the actual rates this fiscal year, you can see we charged $533,000 to public defender. That got reimbursed back from the state. If we'd have been charging what actuary said we should have charged, it would have been an additional $94,000 that would have been charged to public defender's office. That's money we did not get back from the state because we're not charging the correct premiums to departments, if that makes sense. Hopefully it does. So in essence, we're supplementing a state-funded department and losing funds that way. And again, that's happened the last 4 years because the rates have stayed the same the last 4 years. Just want to make that point as you guys look at approving the employer share of the rates. Maybe this is something we can address, changing the employer share for next fiscal year, but I just want to make you aware of it. One other thing I want to point out on the monthly report, page 17, this is a list of all our capital projects. The line item that is highlighted is funds that are available for projects that could be used for the courthouse or the annex building, leftover funds from the refinancing of the OIA bonds. There's an item later on in this agenda Keith Monroe is going to touch on where he's asking for $100,000 for elevator repair over in the courthouse. There's money in this fund. The recommendation there is just to move $100,000 out of that 120 and move it up to a new project line. So just want to point that out to you guys. And that's all I have on the monthly report, unless you have any questions.
Questions of Danny? If not, is there a motion to receive his report?
Motion to receive.
Second.
All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? All right, we'll have the health insurance plan update from John.
Good morning. Well, I bring good news this morning, so that's always positive. First, I want to touch on a couple of updates from Premise Health, formerly I Am Well Health, our clinic system. Some really exciting news. A lot of you know who've been here. Dr. Thomas, Amanda Thomas, she used to be at I Am Well Health. She started I Am Well Health here in Oklahoma City. Great doctor. She's coming back in December, so we'll have a great MD downtown at the Midtown location starting in December, which is very positive. I also met with Premise last week, and they're rolling out a lot of new technology. When they're I Am Well, they're very small. They couldn't invest much in technology, but they wanted to. And long story short, in April, Premise will be rolling out to our members the Epic system. It's technology-based, really mostly based on your phone, but it's an app system where our members can make appointments on the app. They can teleconference the doctor, do video conferencing with the doctor, call the doctor. They can actually make an appointment, and if another appointment comes available, it'll notify them. They can jump forward. They can see all their medical records. They can see their chart. They can talk back and forth on their chart with their doctor to get refills, ask a question, get in. So long story short, we're going to have a lot more technology available through Premise Health soon, which is very good. And that's really the only thing I have for Premise Health. And next, I want to kind of touch on what Danny said about plan performance. My report shows from HealthSmart. These numbers come from them. So these are net numbers after we receive stop-loss reimbursements and such. But this is through October 16th. And really, what I want to focus on is where our spend's going this fiscal year versus last fiscal year. If you look at the far right column, you'll see the numbers trending way down. So, we see the claims numbers come in, but really this is what's churning those claims numbers. This fiscal year, our inpatient facility costs have gone down 26%, outpatient facility down 40%, prescription drug down 32%. Overall, netted out, we're $1.6 million about, down from where we were last year. What I see on the plan side is I see a lot less big claimants this fiscal year, way less. Last year we had a lot of people churning a lot of big dollar claims. That's reduced a lot. Last year we had a lot more liability on our stop-loss contract, those big claimants. There's a lot more higher deductibles in our stop-loss contracts. This year, everybody's at the $250,000 level, so we see less liability on that side. So things are positive so far, and that's really all I have.
Questions of John? If not, is there a motion to receive his report?
Motion. Second.
All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Item 35, John.
Go ahead and remind me what that is if you don't.
Consulting services with Summit.
Okay. What that is consulting services with Summit. We entered into an agreement, 7-1, for Summit to be work with us on our prescription plan to get us those good contracted rates with CVS Health. And in their agreement, it didn't really give them permission to work on our behalf with CVS. So we just did an addendum to their agreement to allow them to work with CVS, to audit CVS, to report with CVS, to work on our behalf with CVS. And that's what that addendum is doing.
Questions? Is there a motion?
Motion.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, and if you'll also talk about the business associate agreement with the county and Summit.
Sure. That goes along with the addendum to their agreement. That allows Summit to work on our behalf with CVS, transfer data to do reporting. It's a standard business associate agreement for the health plan.
Questions? If not, is there a motion?
Motion.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? And John, if you'll talk about the master services agreement with Channel Bound.
Absolutely. We've used them for 2 years now. They do our reporting on our health plan for the 1095 forms. And what those are is forms to show you that you have health insurance. So what they'll do in 2018 is send everyone that has had coverage or does have coverage with us a tax form to prove that they had health insurance coverage.
Questions? Is there a motion?
Motion.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you.
Thank you.
Cody, if you'll give us the BET report.
Good morning.
got two items to discuss this morning. We had an addition to the current watch list. If you notice, item number 2, the defined benefit retirement system, we put $400,000 in there to keep an eye on. We have, if you recall, budgeted $400,000 this year already in the budget, which is what we've put in the last couple years from the general fund. There is a concern, however, that the retirement board has that some of the other transfers that go in to help fund that, the Oki fund, for instance, may not have as much this year. So in anticipation of a potential downside amount going in from other sources, we've put $400,000 on the watch list to kind of keep an eye on that in case we need to fund that later on in the fiscal year. Second item is the planning, from the planning department, the county master plan amendment. I believe that might be the next item on your agenda. What that is, Mr. Gammon, the department head for planning, came to us and was talking to us about the master plan. He visited with us a few months ago when we were doing the budget recommendation for this group, and had made us aware that this was something that was out there and that was going to need to occur. We had asked him to kind of get a little bit more information to us and some more timing information before we made a recommendation on this. He did come to us with that information. Initially, we were looking at roughly a $500,000 expense to update our county master plan. It's been 10 years since it's been updated. Recently, ACOG has done a water study, and that was a huge expense of the $500,000. It was about $250,000 of that expense. So at this point, if we move forward with the master plan, we can leverage that water study that's already been done, save the $250,000. So we're looking at a $250,000 spend. Mr. Gammon's already budgeted $50,000 in his planning budget for this project. So what he's asking for is $200,000 from the general fund reserve to augment those other dollars to get to the $500,000 that's necessary to update the county master plan. And that was recommended by BET.
Questions of Cody? Not, is there a motion to receive his report?
Motion.
Thank you.
Second.
All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? 39 is the recommendation he spoke about for the master plan. Is there any questions of Mr. Gammon? You want to speak to it, Tyler?
I know the commissioners have, but other members of the board may have not seen the master plan. This is the county master plan. That's what it looks like. And inside here is the zoning regulation and the subdivision regulations. These have to be updated from time to time. Like I say, it's been 10 years. Prior to 2070, it was 60 years that we had this updated. We don't want to wait to 60 years again. Ideally, master plans should be updated about every 2 to 3 years. And we're in the 10th year now of this master plan. And we need to bring it up to date, as we can see in some of our meetings, the Planning Commission meetings, Board of Adjustments. There's some rules that need to be changed and updated to coincide with the urbanness of the county. The county's becoming more urban than rural. And in order to do that, we need a guide to go by. This is our Bible. So and that's why we're asking to do it at this time. Excuse me. Because of the fact that a water study has been done. There are other things that are all in place, and this is the cheapest we're going to get it. So,
Questions of Tyler? Is there a motion?
Second.
All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Thank you, Tyler. John, you want to talk about our actuary report from Sageview?
I'm just going to do a quick overview of how they calculated their rates and how they came up with their numbers. Let's see this. Danny spoke about our funding and what's involved in our funding. I just want to make the board aware that the premiums have never been calculated to cover everything in employee benefits fund. There's portions of employee benefits funds, of the fund that's county paid items. So certain items are calculated in the premiums, and certain items are considered for working at the county provides those items. So what the actuary does is they take medical claims, medical admin, prescription claims, dental claims, the retiree supplement cost, and some health care fees, and they use those costs. And what they do is they take our claims, they net out any money that we receive back related to our claims, like stop loss, refunds, and they use those numbers. And what they did for this year is they look back at 16-17. We all know we had a terrible claims year, 16-17. So they thought it was actuarial sound to use just that year, and what they did is they used that year's claims numbers and they put trend on it. They applied 15.4% medical trend, 18.5 prescription trend, and 4.5 dental trend to last year's claims numbers. And what they wanted to provide us is a worst case scenario. So effective January 1st, 2018, if the county implemented the employee, retiree, and employer rates, we would be protected if we had a terrible claims year like we did last year. Worst case scenario funding. And that's their job. That's what they want to do. They want to give us rates that cover our expected costs. 12 months of these rates equal $27,893,000. Last year, if we net out the entire employee benefits account, even the items not calculated into premiums, that would be additional revenue of $1.9 million. The year before, netted out cost, those rates would be $6.2 million more than the entire benefits account. So what my point is that they come up with rates and they provide us with the worst case scenario so our plan's funded. You know, it's been 3 years since we increased employer rates, 2 years since we increased employee rates. We fund the plan through transfers, through premiums, and then the county-funded items. And I just want to remind the board, the county-funded items that aren't in the premium calculations and haven't been are employee life insurance as a benefit for working for the county, vision, stop-loss insurance, county pharmacy, and the employee assistance program. Those aren't calculated into those premium rates. So if you add up those items, every year they equal about $1.6 million. So that's a transfer needed just to start the year to cover those items, since they're not in the premiums. And then the retiree premiums as well, there's no automatic mechanism for the county to pay that. And every year those are about $4.3 million. So starting off the year, $2.6 million for retirees. So starting out the year, we need to transfer about 4.3 just to cover the retiree premium share and those county-funded items. So we've transferred a lot of money into employee benefits, but I want to just kind of give you a transparent picture of why. Last year we had to fund about $6 million overage for claims, and that's why that money's going into. The year before is $1.5 million. The year before is only $524,000. So there is a gap, but some of that gap is made because of those county-funded items. I want to show you that. So if we implemented how Milliman or Sageview suggest our premiums, that'd be about a 50% increase for this coming calendar year, starting January 1st.
For both the employer and the employees?
Correct. And that's funding at worst case scenario.
Assessor has a question.
Sure.
Yeah. What does this report cost us?
This report costs us about $18,000.
So on the death benefits, is that a guarantee when we sign employees, or are we able to adjust that after we enter in employment with somebody, or are we committed to that once they stay with us?
We could change that.
So as opposed to taking money out of someone's pocket, we could adjust the death benefit to absorb. That's worth about how much?
$400,000, not big.
Not a big amount.
Yeah, and nowadays, when you go work for a big employer, kind of life insurance, some sort of life insurance is provided.
Right.
We have a pretty generous $100,000 benefit.
John, very quickly, what is Sageview? You said they only took last year's benefits. What do they normally do?
Normally, what they do is they take 3 years of claims data and they blend it together. and they weigh it heavily on the most recent year. And that's how they come up with projected rates. This year, they looked at our claims data, and they've done this several years for us, but they looked at last year and said, last year was such a big claims year, we want to prepare you if that happens again. And that's how they calculated the rates. So if we have the same claims year as last year, we're covered. But again, those rates, if we fully implement them, will be way overfunded.
May I?
Yes.
John, what was the change in the methodology where they had previously looked at 3 years' worth of data to 1 year? Was it simply because last year was such a high?
Correct. It was so high compared to previous years.
In past years, has that occurred where they've not utilized the rolling 3-year period?
No, it's just because we had such a big increase. That's, it was $6 million more.
But have they ever changed it to where they only used 1 year because it was a
No.
catastrophic? So
No.
did they offer to give you the report with the 3 years and?
No, just from an actuarial standpoint, they said for the county to be fully funded, worst case scenario, this is the method they wanted to use.
May I?
Yep.
That they wanted to use.
Mhm.
Would we have been better off going the 3-year method?
We could ask them to come back with that method.
Is that gonna cost us another 18,000?
Hopefully not. Hopefully not.
Yeah, go
So-
ahead, Joe.
Okay. John, I haven't been on BET or anything in a
Sure.
long time, but I seem to recall the healthcare highways and is it Summit, the prescription arm?
Correct.
When we entered into those agreements, we were told that we should see significant savings. Have we begun to see those savings? And if so, are those numbers or those savings calculated in on setting the actuary cost?
They are not. All they do is look at net costs, and that's after we receive stop-loss payments, et cetera, money back into the plan. They look at net cost, and that's how they calculate it, purely from a numbers basis. They don't look at plan changes or anything.
Setting our rates based on the worst year we've had in 10 years doesn't seem quite right either.
I think they want to protect us, and that's their goal, to protect us if it continues. We know from what we see so far, it's not continuing.
Changing the way their methodology by changing that, that seems like you're not giving apples to apples, though, if you've changed it to 1 year rather than 3 that you've done in the past.
We were pretty consistent claims-wise over the last several years, and then we had this huge spike. So if they took in the past years where they were very consistent and then blended in this spike, the rates may have not been enough. And what they told me, they want to provide us funding levels that will provide worst-case scenario.
Last year, John, we had, what was it, 18, 20 employees that had high claims, is that correct?
That's true. And
And this year, do you see that on the
I look at the
horizon?
reports, excuse me. Last year at this time, those people had generated $1.8 million in claims. Now we have those people generating about $300,000 in claims. So we see less big cases, fewer big cases. And a lot of those people last year on our stop-loss plan, instead of the $250,000 deductible, they had a $750,000 deductible, $800,000 deductible. When I negotiated stop-loss renewal for this year with the plan changes, those 30-something people that had a higher deductible than $250,000 were brought down to $250,000. So we have about $4.4 million less in liability on stop-loss this year as well. So we see less big cases.
Was there a huge cost in lowering that down from 750 to 250?
Not at all. Just a new carrier, new negotiation.
Good.
You have a recommendation?
I put it at the board's decision. Claims are trending down, but we are behind on suggested premium rates. But claims could go way down this year, go down next year since we're self-funded. It's really how the board chooses to fund the plan. Currently, we fund the plan through transfers, premiums. If costs go up, we have to put more money in the account. The biggest thing I want to point out is that premiums have never been calculated to cover the entire expense of employee benefits. So it's really up to the boards, how do they want to fund it? It's your choice. Fund it through transfers from general reserve, fund it purely through premiums. But if they really want to be at the 25-75 split, which we really haven't been in a long time, it's through the actuarial recommendations.
And that recommendation is 50%.
Worst-case scenario. I don't think
Right.
that's accurate this year because we see claims trending way down. We see claims trending way down this year.
But that's what the actuarial says, right? Okay.
Any other questions of John? If not, is there a motion to receive this report?
Motion to receive?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Now, as to what he was just talking about, is there a motion to suggest a rate percentage?
I'd make a motion to increase the employee participation 5% and the retirees' participation by 2%. And
There's-
that would be about a Starbucks cup of coffee for the retirees. It's about $6, and I think for the employees, that would be around $18, I believe, at that rate,
Per month.
per month.
Yeah.
And that would at least give us a chip away of spending the taxpayers' money more graciously.
Maybe at the same time we do that, we should look at probably adjusting the pay minimum to cover the employees on that cost and think about a raise for them to cover the cost of that. We have quite a bit of money in our fund right now. And if we did that at the same time, looking at the employer's side and possibly putting it in effect into January instead of waiting till July. That way we have money in reserve. Doesn't hurt to have it in case some of these things happen. Maybe we ought to think about those things instead of putting the cost on the back of the employees. We give them a raise and maybe try to do even a little more because this 5%, although it's a good start, it's probably not where we're going to end up. We're probably looking at next year and the year after that. Of course, we only do 1 year at a time, I understand, but we have to be thinking about that.
John, if there is an increase, how much time by law do we have to, how much notice, I guess, is?
Good question. I forgot to mention that. 60-day notice. So we have annual enrollment next month, and we have to send those new rates out by November 1st for January 1 implementation. So the board could change the rates at any time. They just have to give employees a 60-day notice.
All right, John, we can wait and we can study the trend some more, let it go a few more months and see how we're going before we make any decisions. That'd be possible too, right?
Correct.
John, make sure I understand.
Sure.
So, as Jerry said, if we wait and we don't do anything to the employees, it's not a one-time option. With the 60-day notice Rick asked about, we can change those rates.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
This is really our only opportunity. If we're going to do it by January, we can adjust mid-year if we give notice to the employees. But, I think now this is the time, if we're going to do this, it would be now so that we can do it in a timely manner.
Leonard?
John, we really have a Cadillac plan, as far as I know and concerned. How many of our tax-paying citizens that pay this have as good an insurance policy as we have?
Well, the thing about our plan, it appears Cadillac, but guess what? There's so many cost-saving features that surgery center, many things are negotiated that we pay way less. So if we go to have an MRI, we pay $300 versus if we go somewhere else, we pay $3,000. So on the outside, it appears Cadillac, but on the inside, we have so many cost savings functions in it that really aren't Cadillac features, if that makes sense. If we did away with all these 100% benefits, what we do is we give an employee the right to go and spend, out of the employee benefits check, $40,000 for a surgery that would cost $6,000 under our other plan. We're paying a lot more money. Some employers make their employees pay more for premiums. Some employers, they cover the total cost of single coverage as a benefit for working for them. You know, in new employee orientation, I see a lot of employees come through the doors, and some of them are surprised by our rates, some of them aren't, but they think it's a great benefit for coming here, and that's what keeps them here, you know, the great benefits. If our costs were way, way higher, would they stay? I'm not sure, but it's really keeps a lot of people here, I think, our great coverage.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
for a motion,
Well, we've got a motion on the floor, but if it doesn't get a second, it's going to die for lack of a second.
I'll second it.
So do you have a friendly amendment that you're wanting to
I'm sure
offer?
we had it clear that the motion is for a 5% increase.
5% increase and 2% on retiree. Yes.
5% for employees, but what about the employer?
That's not, I didn't discuss the employer. I think that we're going
Separate
to
item.
need to talk about that on a different motion.
Okay. Guess that's the next item. I'm sorry.
Under discussion, my concern, it's certainly going to be a hardship on the employee, but if you're talking about raising the employer's rate January 1st through July, I mean, that's a pretty substantial hit to the sheriff's office with the number of employees, and that this certainly wasn't budgeted for. It's
Just to give a word about that is that
Wait a minute.
I thought that we.
We're just
we
on the
would-
employee
we-
one.
Yeah, we're not discussing that yet because I think we all have reasons to discuss that
Well,
differently.
if the employees are paying for it, it's not going to have any impact on the budget, is it?
No, not, my motion isn't going to affect our budgets. I think we'll talk about the employer budgets and how that'll be handled next, I believe.
All right, is there any more discussion? If not, there's been a motion and a second, to be clear, on a 5% employee rate increase and a 2% on the retiree increase. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
No.
no.
Roll call, please.
Assessor? Leonard?
Yes.
Treasurer?
No.
District 3?
No.
District 2?
Yes.
District 1?
No.
Court clerk?
Yes.
Sheriff?
No.
County clerk?
Yes.
It's tied.
Okay, the motion has failed due to lack of majority. Now, is there another motion? No other motions? Is there anybody who wants to consider the employer part of it? Then there's no action on this item. So, 42. Employer health contribution, well, that's what we just got ready to get into. I guess there's no motion on that either. Hearing none.
Mr. Chairman, could I ask a question? Did BET address this? How come there's no recommendation from BET? Were they waiting on additional information to?
Cody?
This was presented to BET, and we did discuss it. The issue in BET was the agenda item was listed a little different than it is for you guys today. Our agenda item mentioned making a recommendation on options 1, 2, 3, or 4. The options that are in your, excuse me, in your packet, the 50%, 10%, 5%, and 3%, and it was equal between employee and retiree. There was no options to change those. For instance, you guys just tried a 5 and a 2 split. That wasn't listed on the option, and the agenda item, according to the DA, ruled the day on that. So we could not come to a consensus on a 50-50, 10-10, 5-5, 3-3. There was no consensus on any of those, and the agenda item wasn't broad enough to allow us to come up with other recommendations. For instance, a difference between the employee and the retiree, or even a 0%, a no change. That was not an option listed in when it was presented to us, so we could not even make a recommendation that there was no change. So we were kind of limited to those 4 choices. That is the reason why we were not able to come up with a recommendation for you guys.
Did y'all take into consideration at one time, we didn't do where the employees contributed? We just took a one-time large out of general fund, and we changed that because it wasn't working. You understand what I'm saying? One time we didn't do where the employees paid the premiums, contributed. Basically, wasn't it done by the general fund? One time each year we distribute.
I think the employer side was like that at one
Yes.
time, but the employees, I think, still contributed. But instead of, for instance, your department being budgeted a certain amount of money and then paying it out monthly, that was all just lumped for everybody out of the general fund, and that was discussed briefly.
And we stopped doing that because it basically didn't work. And it looks like we're creeping back to that. Where we're going to be paying like we paid, instead of $1 million, now we're paying $10 million last year.
Yeah.
If we don't do something, that's to adjust this.
Yeah, I think though, and Danny really, and this is just me speaking for myself because we weren't able to discuss other options, but other than what was listed here. But I personally, I agree with what Danny had mentioned, that right now, if what you're mentioning is that it's not a true, we don't have a true cost of accounting for each department.
We
exactly.
didn't do it by department.
Right, and then what we did was we made some type of modification to where departments paid some, but we're still funding it through transfers. If we increase the employer side, then we charge the departments and we have more of a true cost of each department if we adjust the employer side, but that's different than on the employee side. That's a different discussion.
Right.
But I do agree that if you increase the employer side, it would get us even closer to a true depiction of the cost of that department than it is today. I think today it's better than it was years ago when it was the lump sum coming in. There was a move to make it more accountable. I think if you change that to what Danny was mentioning earlier, then it gets you even further into that.
It looks like we're slowly, like I said, creeping back towards the old way, which I don't think is the right way.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
don't we have to set the rate, or is by not changing it, we're setting the rate as the way it is? Is that what we're doing?
I think we're just leaving it the way it is, was my understanding,
So
unless
that's
we
the-
vote a change.
That's how it was last year. Last year it was left the same, just exactly the same thing happened as this year. It did not get a due pass motion. It just remained in place because it did not get nothing else got a due pass motion.
Right.
And just to be clear, we did have some motions in BET, and there was some interest by some folks on some of these options. There just wasn't enough of an interest in these particular options to get enough of a consensus to make a recommendation.
Further questions of John or Cody?
Have we moved past?
We can go back
The
if
rates.
there's something that you want to offer.
Yes, Mr. Chairman. In looking at some things, I need to confirm with Danny, and I understand that any rate increase hits retirees or some of our employees who basically are on a fixed income because we haven't had rates. But I also think that it's responsible for us to move closer to filling that gap. We still do the premium-free month, is that correct? Okay. And I'm not a math major, but in looking at that, if we were to increase the rates minimally, say the 3% that's included in the packet, our employees would still, if they participate in the health assessment, would still realize a savings on a yearly basis, if I'm looking at that correctly. Of course, that amount would be less, but in looking at that and in trying to balance the needs of the employees versus the needs of the employer, I would move that we would increase the employee rates by 3% and the retiree rates by 3%.
This is on item
The-
41.
Yes, sir.
I'd like to comment on that.
Yes,
So
sir.
we look at real numbers. If we went up 5%, I think that's about $18 a month per employee.
It's about 20.
So the number we're talking about, you start throwing percentage out, sometimes people assume it's a huge number. It's 18%, it's about $6 to $9 on the retirees. If we fail to do it, this gap's going to get bigger and bigger and bigger. So, as I said before, instead of putting on the backs of the employees, if we did a raise across the board, we have in reserve, we have the money to do that. And if we gave a raise, maybe even a little more than what we, and then with the sheriff's concerns, I understand what he's saying. He has the most employees, and that takes money out of his special revenue fund. But as we've proven, it's been said that we don't give supplement money in September, but when the sheriff came and asked for the $450, we did. And I think if they put it together for us, none of us would fail to support the sheriff if he needed extra money to cover some of these costs when it can be identified for this type of thing. So if we gave the money for the raises and then put the 5% and the 2% in, we can cover the whole thing. We can cover ourselves, and then we can identify what the sheriff's needs are when they put it together for us. I think turning our back on it and 4 to 4 is not really the true answer to this problem.
Well,
How do we deal with, on this motion, on this item, how do you deal with a salary increase on this agenda item?
You can't, so we've got.
That's what I mean, and I don't see tying those two together.
Okay, well, there's been a motion. Is there a second?
It's what item?
What,
Chairman?
41, he made a motion about 3% employee and 3% retiree increase. It's from District 1.
Second.
Now, is there any further discussion? If not, was there a vote? All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed?
No.
Any other opposed? Okay. Now, do you want to address the employer part of that?
That's not on the agenda.
It's item 42.
Oh, I'm sorry, the employee, I thought you were talking about salaries.
Wouldn't it be, I mean, you all tell me what you think, but shouldn't we be addressing that during budgeting time or during a needs-based time and not in the middle of the year when people already have their budgets? Are we talking about actually changing that? Because I know that for the sheriff, that would hurt if we suddenly change the employer's rate. And I mean, he has a budget he's working with.
Well, I think this says rates to be effective July 1st of 2018, so that would start the next fiscal year. So the agenda item doesn't allow for it to be this this fiscal year is the way I read it.
Okay.
So that would be the charge of the BET to factor in for the next year's budget. The rates we just increased were for January 1st of 2018 for the employees, but this is for July.
Okay.
Are there motions or discussion on item 42? Hearing none, we'll move on to item. Sir?
I was just
Sorry.
curious what BET, if any discussions or recommendations or thoughts they had on this.
Cody?
There was discussion on the employer rates. Once again, we were kind of boxed in with these particular options, but I do think that one thing that was discussed was that employer rates did not have to be determined as immediately as the employee side, because the employee side needed to be done now, so you get notification out for the January 1 date. For the employer side, if we're looking at a change on July 1st, it's not, it wasn't as urgent for us to make a haphazard decision the other day on the employer side. We would be happy to look at that, and that's, I think that would be more prudent for us to take a more in-depth look at what the needs would be and what the expenses and stuff would be on an employer change. What kind of impact would it really have to the budget? Because that's what we want to do, is have a positive impact on the budget, and it's going to have a negative impact on particular departments and special revenues, and those special revenues, if they cannot absorb that increase, then we may need to look at a supplement. And if we're looking at a supplement, then that would decrease the savings from the general fund. So I think there's a lot of moving parts that we weren't able to assess in that short period of time. But if you guys would like us to, we would be happy to look in depth at the employer rate.
District 1?
Yes. And this might be more appropriate for Danny with regard to the budget, but I think it's important that the county also look at increasing our rates. I understand that what we heard in the actuary, that the cost and looking at some of that. So Danny, my question to you is, how soon would BET need to report back to the board with a recommendation regarding employer rates for you all to be able to calculate in that figure for the estimate of needs as we go forward for next budget year?
Well, we have the calculation. We know the rates. It wouldn't take long to calculate that. So obviously BET could meet as soon as you guys want us to meet. I would say meet next month, look at those numbers again, and then maybe come back with a recommendation next month.
Cody, can you repeat that into the record for him?
Yes, Mr. Lambert said that we could look at this next month and we would have plenty of time to determine what those rates are. I don't think on the clerk side, whenever you guys are developing the estimate of needs form, I mean, it's just a plug and chug. So once we get that, you can put that in there. It is definitely something that needs to be done before we start processing the estimate of needs, because that needs to be a consideration for next year's budget. So, you know, we moved it up last year to give us a little bit more time to do an in-depth analysis, but we're still, you know, looking February-ish. So we do have plenty of time to take a long, hard look and not just, you know, one meeting. I mean, this is something that we can have multiple discussions on and look at it from various different angles and aspects to make sure that we're making an informed recommendation.
So for a department like the sheriff, or someone with a lot of employees, someone like the sheriff, as we're beginning to build the budget for next year with the employer rate going up, they're able to put that into their estimate of needs, and we know going forward exactly what that employee cost is.
Certainly.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
So could we motion to defer this for 60 days to get the recommendation of BET?
60 days or 30 days?
Well, he said he wanted more than one meeting.
Oh, okay.
That's the only reason I said 60.
I mentioned more than one meeting. We've got one meeting scheduled a month, but we can schedule as many special meetings as necessary. If this board, if it's your will for us to come back in 30 days, we'll have as many meetings between now and 30 days. We don't have to wait till the next scheduled meeting. I can call a special meeting and start on this immediately. So you guys tell us when you want this back, and we'll have something for you.
Okay.
I think the more time we had to consider it, the better for absorbing any blow to our budgets. But your motion is for 2 months, it's fine.
I'm happy to change that for, if you wanted it 30 days, but
I mean,
Well, and if it was 30 days, and if for some reason the kinks weren't all worked out, we could always, you know, potentially defer again.
Right. Okay, so do you change your motion?
yes, the motion is for defer it for 30 days
Is there-
until we have a report from BET.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
All right, all in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Cody. This is to approve flu shots for the county employees at no cost. The sheriff and juvie, as I understand it, have already had theirs. Is that correct, Sheriff?
Yes.
This is for up to 250 shots. Is there a motion?
Make a motion?
Second.
All in favor, say aye. Aye. For the public, that is going to be on October 27th from 1 to 4. Any opposed?
Ask a question. Or you can, well, finish this one and then let me ask.
Okay. We're finished.
Okay. Can I make sure that you're okay on item 42, instead of saying 30 days, to bring it back on the next agenda in
Yeah.
November for a regular scheduled meeting? Is that okay?
That's sufficient. Do we need a clarification on that motion to council? Is it understood?
I mean, if the
I think it's understood.
Okay, just making sure.
All right, thank you. Item 44, our IT report.
Morning, everyone. Augie's out for the rest of the week for personal reasons, so I'll be reading his update for everyone. He had updates for work orders and inventory. Districts 1, 2, and 3 were all at a work order inventory training session on September 26th. Districts 2 and 3 are beginning to utilize the work order and inventory systems. They're starting to load their beginning inventory balances into Munis and beginning to track their work orders in the work orders module. Augie wanted to single out Tex again for his continued help in taking care of this, so thank you. Tex Cobb, by the way, if anybody doesn't know Tex. The update on the Munis version, it is going to be updated to 11.3 in test environment within the next 4 to 6 weeks as their schedule permits. They are working on getting it scheduled for us, and they'll let us know when it's going to happen. They had some new sheet reports for work order and modification to the annual enrollment for Mr. Wilkerson. They modified the annual report so that it can be run in any year. The dates are no longer hard-coded into the report, so it can be modified as needed. We also had a problem yesterday that I wanted to bring to the board's attention for Munis was having a dashboard issue. There was a defective web part on Tyler's end that they are aware of. They are working to fix that now. They have been working on it over the last couple of days, and I'm getting updates on that regularly. So if it becomes any more of a problem, we will know about it. But Munis is working currently, to the best of our knowledge. And any questions?
Questions of Rich? Seeing none, is there a motion to receive his report?
Motion.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Thank you, sir. Item 45, to transfer for the election board in the amount of $50,578.09 from salary and benefits to operation. This is necessary for the cost of special election for the sheriff on September 12th.
Motion.
This is because it was less than estimated. Is that, all right. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Item 46 is the capital improvement. It's $100,000 from refined OIA earnings balance of $120,469 to set up a new project for the courthouse elevator drives. This is Mr. Monroe.
Good morning. We have 4 elevators in the courthouse that are old and suffering. The C elevator is down at this time and is requiring a new drive mechanism for service to be restored. The drive mechanism can no longer be found, it can't be rebuilt, and has to be replaced. That's at a cost of $22,500. I'm asking for the money to replace the 4 drives if and when they become necessary. The first, beginning with the C elevator, $22,500, having the available funds when the others go down, which is anybody's guess.
Is there a motion?
Motion to transfer the money.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you, Keith. Item 47, a financial update from the sheriff.
Going to have Mr. Skuta come up. This is just part of our commitment to the board that we're going to keep you all updated on a monthly basis.
Thank you, John.
Good morning. As Sheriff Taylor said, this is part of our goal to give you guys a monthly update as far as the Sheriff's Office General Fund goes. What you guys have before you is a 3-page document. The first 2 pages are going to be the general fund, kind of as where we stand as of today. As of yesterday, October 18th. As of the 18th, we're 30% through the entire fiscal year. Through the end of September, we were 25% through the fiscal year. Looking strictly we're going to go kind of category by category, but salaries and benefits, we're currently tracking fairly well there. And I believe in general fund will, without any major or drastic changes, that we're tracking end up right where the budget called for. There have been some questions as far as raises, and so I wanted to touch on that. the detention officers and detention corporals within the detention centers. These are lowest paid detention officers within our facility. We're all given a $100 pay raise per month. That went into effect August 21st. Those were the only individuals that are actually given a pay raise for their classification. The thought process behind that was we were approximately $200 under where Tulsa County was as far as their starting pay for their detention officers went. We did not believe we could afford the $200 a month when we looked at where we stood, but $100 was manageable. So that was definitely a start. And since that's gone into effect, we actually have seen a little bit lower attrition rate. Whether or not we can put that 100% to that raise, it would be difficult, but I would definitely say it has an impact on our ability to hire as well as retain our detention and staff employees. Moving down to maintenance and operations, everything you're going to see here for year to date is going to be actual expenditures. This will not include anything that's been encumbered. So these were actual expenses to date. Some of the encumbrances are blankets set up to cover certain things for the entire fiscal year. So as you look down, if you see something highlighted in red, that means right now it's trending a little bit over, or it's trending over the 30% year-to-date mark. There are only a few of those. Some of those are because they're front-funded for the fiscal year, or licenses and fees, for example, that go into effect towards the beginning of the year. And the other ones I wanted to touch base on as well, if you go down to the second page, you'll see a category for building and grounds, both maintenance, supplies, and vendor maintenance. These are, in my opinion, almost an interchangeable line item in the fact that it's hard for us to determine at the time whether or not those expenses will be done by our staff and parts just need to be ordered, or if it's something that is outside the scope of what we're able to fix and we have to have a vendor come in and perform said maintenance. And so those really, in a lot of the areas in which we're trending over right now, it's really based on the maintenance of the facility. And I'll touch on that here in a second as well. Inmate medical, with our population being down, our exposure to offsite and pharmacy claims has definitely been better. We are expecting Armor to provide us a dashboard, which is their projection report to us. They were not able to get it finished for this month, mainly because they are just now starting to pay some of those offsite claims that started this fiscal year. But they promised me I'll have that for you all next month. I also want to touch base on last fiscal year's inmate medical cap, because I have some good news to bring there. End of the last fiscal year, we encumbered just over $800,000 for what was projected to be the overage on the inmate medical cap, offsite pharmacy, and so forth. The most recent report we got on that is trending at around the $400,000 to $450,000 mark, which is definitely a positive, which is around $350,000 less than where their projections were coming in at. So once those are paid and closed out, that money will go back into the general fund, but unless the budget's open, it's my understanding that won't be usable until next fiscal year, unless the budget's reopened and to absorb that cost or those revenues. Inmate food, we're still tracking very well there. We're still looking like we're going to come slightly under budget on inmate food. A lot of that is due in large part to our inmate population. And on the kitchen, we were hoping to be back in there January 1st. It's looking like we're trending to be slightly after that, but we're still hoping it's sometime in January. And as we get more updates from the project manager on that, I'll also provide these at that monthly meeting. At the BOCC meeting on October 18th, so yesterday, the BOCC approved a blanket purchase for more jail cell lights. We are slowly working our way through the detention center replacing the lights that need to be replaced. Back in June, we ordered 200 of them. Those have since been delivered, received, and in the process of installing those. And they are definitely they're an LED light. So the cost savings on being LED as far as fluorescent bulbs will hopefully be seen as our utility bills come down as all of those get installed. They're also supposed to be more inmate proof, so they won't be as damaged or torn apart by the inmates.
How much are those?
Those are around $450 a light.
Ooh.
They're definitely pricey, but it's because it's a correctional grade light. It's got a little bit more, it's got thicker lenses on it so it can't be broken, metal can't be taken apart.
Is that a problem? It's been a big problem?
It has been. We went through one of the jail cells. Not only were they tearing them off, they were also pulling the electrical wiring from the light fixtures. So these will hopefully correct that and replace the lights that have been broken by the inmates. So yesterday, the commissioners approved another 400 to the tune of approximately $181,000. Those will be delivered in 30 days and again in 75 days to give our facility maintenance time to get those installed.
How much percentage will that cover?
I forget how many jail cells we have in there. I will bring that to the next.
I was just curious.
I will bring that. It will put a very large dent in the building. And then the other thing I wanted to touch on that was requested last month was how our inmate population is tracking. This is also the last page in your report I handed out to you, but I've also thrown it up on the big screen for those in the audience. This is our inmate population according to the agency snapshot report going back to July 1st of this fiscal year. The red line on there signifies when Grant Billingsley's department put staff on site. I've also had some communication with him, and I'm going to actually bring this report farther back in time to most likely April or May, because when Judge Trong started looking at the ORs, it was before the fiscal year started. But this trend is definitely a positive one in nature. It keeps going down, and hopefully that trend continues. But I think it's helpful to put it in graphical format for you all to see the progress being made. The population of the county inmates are going down, but we're also seeing a proportional decrease to non-county inmates, DOC, JNS inmates that are waiting transfer to Lexington, as well as the municipal inmates. So very, very positive news there. Yes, Mr. Sullivan.
How long do you expect this trend to continue, and what do you see as the bottom of it?
Hopefully the trend does continue. It'd be tough to determine what the bottom is until probably we get there and we start seeing a plateau. I think as Sheriff Taylor has mentioned before, we are entering some of the colder months of the year. And so with having a graphical representation, we're going to hopefully be able to see if cold weather or different things that occur create spikes in the jail population. You'll see one spike on there. That was from Labor Day weekend.
Do you guys have concerns on November the 1st when the laws change? Certain felonies will go to misdemeanors, that might create a big spike in.
I think with the law change of 780, 781 creating many of the drug-related charges as well as property crimes being adjusted from felonies to misdemeanors, it would become one of those things we have to kind of wait and see. Hopefully they're not serving more county jail time on those, but until really we see the full impact of that going into effect November 1st, and then you have the time period of sentencing and so forth. So we may not see it necessarily November 1st. We may not see it at all, but I think there will be a delay from the time those go into effect when we actually see the impact, if any. And I think Sheriff Taylor can elaborate on that more if he chooses.
Well, that's a certain, I've been bringing that to everyone's attention because there is that possibility because of these charges being reduced from felons to misdemeanors that you may see judges start sentencing people to county jails, and that would certainly up our population, and it would happen fairly quickly if that, but that is a possibility. We'll just have to look at that, November and December and see what the trend is.
I have a question.
Sure.
Captain. In regards to some of the funding cuts at the state, do you all see that affecting drug court? Because people sentenced to drug court, if there's not funding there from the state, will that have an effect on your population, or is it too early?
I think in a lot of the changes that are happening at the state level, I think it's always too early to see when some of these have gone into effect fairly recently, including some of the ones with the Department of Mental Health this week. So I think it's going to take time to see those impacts. I don't think you can predict it today.
Okay, thank you.
If you do have they're talking about this shutdown of all the mental health thing, isn't that the natural thing that would happen is the jail is going to take in a lot more people very quickly?
I think that's probably an assumption that can be had. Hopefully that's not the case. But until we start seeing those trends or seeing that pattern, I don't like trying to predict the future.
On the water consumption, I know that had been high. You're working on the electricity. Is there anything to be done on water consumption, or what are you seeing on the rates for that and the amount of money we budget for that every year?
You're talking about the water consumption for the actual building?
Uh-huh.
To be honest, I don't see those reports. That's something, the utilities for that building come out of the general fund, general government.
Okay.
So I haven't seen those, but if those are shared with me, I'll be more than happy to look at the flux of
It's just
water
my
usage.
understanding from the city, we're in the top 5 consumers throughout Oklahoma City. So I just didn't know what that budgetarily was and if water rate increases affected us and what, if anything, could be done about that. Any other questions of John?
To add, hopefully it could go down in water consumption, because the advantage, even though it may be temporarily, the advantage we've had the last few months by the population being lowered, we've actually had the ability to empty out a whole pod. And that allowed our maintenance crew to come in, and that's where we're fixing leaks, showers, toilets, painting, fixing holes in walls from cell to cell, and also fixing the electrical work and the lights. And if this trend will just stay with us the next few months, that as we put these light fixtures up, they're getting better and better and faster. And as long as we can keep that population down, it allows us to get in there and do things that we haven't been able to do in a long time, because we had no place to put these inmates.
Right. Okay, any other questions of John or the sheriff? If not, is there a motion to receive the report?
Motion to receive it, and thank you.
All in favor, say aye. Aye, thank you. Board comments, sheriff?
None, sir.
Clerk?
Like to thank the sheriff's office for doing the reports. It's really, really helpful, and appreciate it very much.
Court clerk? District 1?
Yes, Commissioner Johnson was on her way this morning for the budget board meeting and received a phone call. Her granddaughter had suffered a medical emergency, and her name is Crystal. And if you guys would just keep her in your thoughts and prayers, I know Willa would appreciate it, and Willa's at the hospital.
Thoughts and prayers. District 3?
Commissioner Vaughn is sadly attending a funeral this morning, couldn't be here.
Treasurer? Assessor? All right, any citizens to be heard? Any new business? If not, is there a motion to adjourn?
Motion?
All in favor, say aye. Aye.
Very good.
I'll get that name for you. Hello, Scooter. What happened, Scooter, man?